All right, settle down, everyone. We're going to start the post movie lecture now. If you remember from the earlier lecture, I said that in character driven screenplays, there isn't a single external want that drives the plot, but rather something internal. This internal want or character spine manifests itself in a variety of different goals at different times and places and different sequences and subplots, but it all stems from this single internal drive that's clear to the audience. In Ladybird, we do indeed see her pursuing a variety of different wants. We see her pursuing boyfriends, we see her pursuing new best friends, we see her pursuing this goal of going to an East Coast school, and so on. All these external goals that are pursued at different times all spring from a single internal goal that I'd call the Ladybird Project. It's a person that she wants to be. This person that she imagines named Ladybird is someone who would go to Yale, someone who is rich and is part of a higher social class, someone who is immersed in culture, someone who is leading a life of exciting romance, someone who's brilliant and talented and good at math, someone who is going to the East Coast where she imagines everything is different than it is in Sacramento. So Christine wants to be Ladybird very, very badly, but is having trouble achieving that. And the tension of the movie is created by the threat that her project, her desire to be this other person, puts on the relationships in the movie. We worry that as she pursues being Ladybird, she's going to lose these relationships. For example, Christine pursues a new best friend because she thinks being part of the more popular crowd is in line with the person she wants to be, Ladybird. This creates tension because while we hope that Christine will ultimately be happy and thrive, we fear that in pursuing more popular friends, she's going to lose the relationship with Julie, Beanie Feldstein, a relationship that the audience cares more about. Likewise, in the central relationship with her mother, we have direct conflict between mother and daughter, one that is crystallized by their arguments over her name. Christine wants to be called Ladybird, but her mother wants her to be called Christine. And her mother wants this Christine to be a person who is more grateful about the things that she has and less selfish about pursuing something better. So there is conflict based on the inner emotional drives, the character spine of these two people. It's a conflict over the daughter's identity. The mother wants her to be one kind of person, and the daughter wants to be something entirely different. These character conflicts create a tension between Ladybird's want, the boyfriends, the status, and the East Coast school, and Christine's need, embodied by her relationships with Julie, Marion, the mentor, the kindly nun. Another way to think about it is this. We are looking at the movie from the perspective of adults. The filmmaker is looking back at adolescence from a position of greater wisdom. So while we hope that Christine gets what she wants in terms of coming of age, the growth, the success, affirmation, and independence, we also fear that she will lose the people who are important to her while pursuing these naive and sometimes shallow dreams. So the tension here isn't us hoping Christine gets what she wants. She pursues these wants in a lot of negative ways. She lies, she takes people for granted, she could be selfish, but we hope she gets what she needs, that she finds the adventure she's looking for while still maintaining her bonds to the things that she loves, or rather the things that she pays attention to, as the nun says, family, friends, and Sacramento itself. All right, now let's return to those 7 questions that I said that you should ask about any character in order to understand them more deeply. We can ask those questions about Christine or Ladybird, and that helps us understand why certain moments in the story are emotionally impactful and turning points. We ask, what does Ladybird want? She wants to be Ladybird. We can ask, what does she think will happen if she doesn't get it? She worries that she'll turn out like her mother. We ask what she needs. She ultimately needs gratitude for the things she left behind. We can ask, what is her block? What is blinding her to her need? And that, I think, is her temper or her adolescent selfishness. We can ask what her picture of happiness is. There are a number of pictures in the movie that defined what that life dream is, but I picked the blue house as embodying the type of life that she thinks she wants for herself. And we can ask, what is the worst thing that could happen for her? And I think for her, it's being found out. Being found out as not special, as being ordinary. And then lastly, what is she secretly ashamed of? I think she's ashamed that she's a liar. And that's why getting found out by her mother was such an impactful moment for her. So after getting a sense of the character wants and needs and the tensions that are created by them, we are in a better place to look at the structure of the movie overall. Structure, as I've said in previous lectures, is just a way of modulating tension and hooking audience engagement. We've identified the main tension as pertaining to the survival of character relationships, and the primary relationship in the movie is between mother and daughter. So where is the point of attack? Well, after the opening scene establishes the conflict with the mother over where Ladybird is going to school, the place that we first start to worry about the relationship and the first point at which Christine seems to embark on her Ladybird project is when she tells her father that she is applying to East Coast schools and gets him to agree not to tell her mother. This is one of those moments of revelation where we know something that a character on screen, the mother, doesn't, and it creates a kind of ticking clock or ticking time bomb so that we wonder what will happen when the mother finally finds out. When the mother does finally discover the lie, the recognition resolves the tension of the second act in that we think the worst has happened, that there has been an irrevocable break between mother and daughter. So in other words, we have a point of attack when she asks her father not to tell her mother that she's applying to East Coast schools, and we get a second culmination when the mother finally finds out. When looking at the sequences of the movie, we can identify them by looking at the sub-goals of Christine's Ladybird project. There's a sequence around auditioning and performing in the play. There is a sequence around her relationship with Danny, beginning with a kiss and ending when she discovers him kissing a boy in the bathroom. There's a sequence structure around her pursuing new friends and ditching old ones. Later in the third act, there's a sequence built around her break with her mother, and then a final sequence about her experiences at college. Because these sequences are built around relationships, they are less distinct than in plot-driven movies, like, say, Finding Nemo, where each sequence was defined by a clear plot problem and a clear sequence antagonist or ally. But each sequence is still distinct because it covers a particular sequence tension, like, say, will her relationship with Danny work out or not? Notice that the second act also turns around Christine's goal to become Ladybird. There is a major decision point when she's on her way to the prom in which she abandons her want, defined by Jenna and Timothy Chalamet's character, and embraces her need, embodied in her relationship with Julie. Thus, the second act ends with Ladybird at a real low point, seemingly not getting what she wanted, or, in that she breaks with the mother, getting what she needs. The third act tension is established when she gets the acceptance to college, and she once again has the opportunity to get what she wants. Another aspect of the structure that is important to point out is the juxtaposition of plot elements. Successes or high points in one area of her life are always paired with failures or low points in other points in her life. Here in this chart, the blue beats concern her family and her need, while the red beats concern her Ladybird project and her want. Notice how the high points in one area are paired with low points in another. This keeps the audience on a kind of character-driven roller coaster of highs and lows for Ladybird, as our hopes and fears are triggered by each new success or failure. Okay, here's a little sidebar. It's clear that the tension in a character-driven movie comes from the personality conflicts and contrasts between the characters. So it is essential when conceiving your characters to give them contrasting personalities. This is a chart showing 9 personality types. It's a personality typing system called the Enneagram, but the typing system isn't that important. so much as the point that each of the major characters in Ladybird fits a different personality in the system. A personality type is just a way to categorize people according to how they react under stress or conflict, and how in general they navigate their world. So Kyle is self-assured and direct, Danny is optimistic and enthusiastic, Julie is loyal but skeptical, especially of Ladybird's behavior later in the movie. Miguel is a bit cerebral and withdrawn. Jenna is a social achiever. As I've said with regard to many elements and tools of screenwriting, contrast between elements tends to heighten tension, while affinity tends to resolve tension. So when the mother is behaving like a type 1, a strict perfectionist, and Ladybird is acting like a type 4, an intense individualist, there is a natural conflict between the two. To Ladybird, her mother is critical and controlling. To Marion, her daughter is self-indulgent and inconsiderate. At these moments, there is a lot of tension between them. However, there is another side to each character that is caring, generous, friendly, and warm-hearted. And when they are both in this mode, they are more aligned and the tension between them resolves. Advice that I once got from a USC professor back in the 90s was that I should look at each of the scenes I had in my screenplay and ask myself, does this scene either 1, advance the plot, the pursuit of a want, or reveal something essential about a character? If a scene did neither, it should be cut from the screenplay. There are a number of scenes in Ladybird that don't necessarily advance Christine's want or play an essential role in the plotting, but they do reveal something important about character. We see this in juxtaposed scenes of Ladybird and her mother. For example, one scene in which Ladybird kindly and warmly consoles Danny and promises not to tell his secret, and another scene right after that in which Marion consoles the priest and promises not to tell his secret. With both Christine and Marion, it is important to see their behavior outside of the ongoing arguments they have with each other. We need to see the other side of their character, a warm, empathic, likable side. A side that shows that for all their differences, they are a lot alike. Christine isn't always self-involved, and Marion isn't always judgmental and perfectionistic. These scenes that reveal character help audience engagement because 1, we like and care about the characters, Ladybird and Marion, more, and 2, we see the side of the personalities that we hope that each will see in the other. We become more invested in their relationship working out. This is another case of letting the audience in on something that another character doesn't know, because we see a side of Ladybird that Marion doesn't see, and we see a side of Marion that Ladybird doesn't see. So we have a sense of two people who have a lot in common, but they just don't quite know it. Another thing that I'll point out is that these scenes of character warmth and bonding and closeness often happen in scenes of aftermath, scenes that don't necessarily advance the plot, but let us know something essential about what has just happened and how the characters feel about it. Moving on, I'd like to show you some specific moments in Ladybird to show you how the writer-director utilizes various screenwriting concepts. The opening image is the first image the audience sees in a movie, and it has, simply by virtue of its placement, a big impact. So storytellers choose this image carefully so that it often reveals tone and world and themes and genres and tensions of the movie the audience is about to see. It tells us what the movie is about. Conversely, the closing image often relates to this opening image and the deeper themes, encapsulating what has changed for the characters and their worlds since the story began. In Ladybird, the opening image is, to quote Gerwig, a modern-day romantic Mary Cassatt ripoff painting of motherhood. She's being self-deprecating, but her intention is clear. She wants to impress upon the audience that this is a movie about a mother-daughter relationship. And by showing this particular image, we know that despite the conflict we will see later, that these two people have a deep bond. The final shot of the movie is Ladybird all alone without her mother, after having just called her and thanked her, something we couldn't imagine her doing at the beginning of the movie, especially after that opening car scene, which we'll talk more about later. The simple idea of these opening and closing images is that something fundamental in Ladybird's life has changed. In the beginning, she is bonded but at odds with her mother. At the end, she is independent and free of her mother, but also entirely on her own and wistful about the connection and affinity she had for the person who's no longer there. But as I've said about visual storytelling, often specific images carry more emotional weight than dialogue. With visuals in mind, we can look at the third act of Ladybird, which turns on several key visuals. We see her wake up in the hospital, having just had a humiliating night of binge drinking, and she sees a mother and son across from her. When, as filmmakers, we want to reveal a character's inner thoughts and emotions, we often encapsulate them in an image that they see and experience. From that image and her reaction, we sense what she is thinking about her own mother, thinking that she's now facing the world alone and making a bit of a fool of herself. Likewise, when she walks into a church and listens to the choir, she has an epiphany. Notice how she is backlit so that she looks almost angelic, almost as if she has a halo. This is a plant and payoff because we have heard again and again that she wants to get away from her Catholic school, and yet she looks overwhelmed by the music's beauty. It is a window into the soul because we are looking at a private moment that no one can see except us, the privileged movie audience. She is not lying or trying to act cool or trying to save face or trying to play a role for anyone else. She's encountering her need in an entirely private and authentic moment encapsulated by a single image. Another window into the soul moment happens earlier in the film when Marion is driving away from the airport. Again, she is by herself, witnessed only by the movie audience, and having just dropped her daughter off and refused to get out of the car, she bursts into tears. It's another visual storytelling moment in which we hold on a character encountering their need. Marion needs to let her daughter know that she loves her just as she is, and that she will miss her, but Marion is realizing this too late. A good example of repetition with variation are all the scenes we see of Marion and Ladybird over and over in the car. The entire arc of their relationship happens in the car. It begins in the car when they are so at odds that Ladybird jumps out of it. They reconcile and have a bonding moment in the car when Ladybird cries over a bad first-time sexual experience. They are at odds again when Marion refuses to see her off. And lastly, when Ladybird leaves her a message, two images of them happily driving are juxtaposed. They may not be together, but there is still a bond. This is an example of visual affinity instead of visual contrast, resolving the tension between them. There are all sorts of examples of plant and payoff in Ladybird, but in particular, I'll point out the ones that concern her name. At the beginning of the story, she is asked her name at the audition, and she says that it's Ladybird, the name I gave to myself. Later, at a college party, she's asked her name, and she says Christine, showing how her feelings about her identity have changed over the course of the film. What I love about that moment is that immediately afterwards, when asked about where she lives, she lies and says San Francisco. That's another payoff, a payoff of a moment with Jenna earlier in the film when she says she prefers San Francisco. This shows that while she has grown, she hasn't changed completely. Another example of a plant is when Ladybird and Julie are crying together in the car while listening to a particular song. This plant is paid off when Ladybird hears the song a second time while in the car with Kyle and Jenna. Because of the repetition and the planted payoff structure, the audience is provoked to remember the earlier emotional scene. And when we hold on Ladybird's face, we imagine that we know what she is feeling and thinking, that she is in a car with people who don't care about her and that she misses Julie. When Kyle says that he hates the song and Ladybird says that she loves it, the subtext is that she is done trying to win their approval, her want, and is embracing her more authentic relationships, her need. Planted payoff is used here as an effective tool to let the audience in on what a character is thinking and feeling. The plant is a bit of inside information, the bond with Julie, so that even if the other teenagers in the car don't understand the significance of Christine saying that Julie is her best friend, we, the audience, do. All right, now we're going to take everything that we've learned about story and structure and apply it to a particular scene, the opening scene of Ladybird. This scene is a great example of polarity. And by polarity, again, I mean that the way the scene starts is entirely different in mood and in conflict as the end of the scene. In this particular scene, the two characters begin in a state of harmony. They're aligned in their emotions and having an extremely positive experience and a bonding experience. By the end, they couldn't be more at odds with each other and are having a completely negative experience. And it ends on a high note of conflict. But more than just polarity, I want to point out that the scene has a definite structure to it. It has 3 acts, in the sense that there is a first part in which the tension of the scene is established, a second long middle part in which the tension escalates, and a third part in which the tension comes to a head and then is resolved. Excuse me. There are clear beats, 8 of them, just like the 8 sequences of a larger story, in which specific conflicts are fought. And there are turning points to the scene, places that mark a point of attack, culmination, and climaxes, places in which one character or another escalates the conflict. If we look at the script itself, these structures become apparent, and the key lines and the key pauses in the back and forth banter define clear beats within the scene. In beat number 1, we are in the first act of the scene, establishing the status quo, where they are, what they're doing, and how they're feeling. They are listening to The Grapes of Wrath, and both are moved to tears. Exposition is delivered as Ladybird says their college trip only took 21 hours and 5 minutes, and they laugh together. But the affinity and serenity is broken when Ladybird tries to change the radio station, and her mother says that they should just sit with the moment. It's just a little spark of conflict, but it acts as the inciting incident of the scene, breaking their unity and triggering long-standing arguments. It's a little moment, but it encapsulates the different wants of each of the characters. Ladybird wants something more than what she has and is searching for something new. Marion wants to be grateful for what she has and accept things as they are. So the second act of the scene begins with a challenge by Ladybird. She says, "I wish I could live through something." The subtext being that her life is not enough. Marion reacts with sarcasm. "Okay, fine, yours is the worst life of all, you win." Marion feels attacked, so in beat 4, she responds to Ladybird's "what I have is not enough" with criticism implying that what you are is not enough. Marion wants Christine to be grateful for what she has. This leads to the midpoint of the scene and the big reveal that escalates the stakes of the argument. Ladybird says that she wants to go to school on the East Coast. This ramps up the intensity of the conflict, and Marion brings up her smarter brother and the impossibility of the family paying for college, then escalates the argument herself by telling her, "You only care about yourself." This leads to the 6th beat of the scene, in which they argue about Immaculate Heart. Notice how much exposition is delivered in this argument. We learn all sorts of things about the family and Ladybird's life, and little things like the driver's test are advertised. But more importantly, we establish the fundamental argument that mother and daughter will be having the entire movie. The subtext of everything Ladybird says is, "Let me be something more than this." And the subtext of everything Marion says is, "Stop being selfish and be happy with what you have." So the second act of the scene ends when Marion goes nuclear in the argument and says, "You couldn't get into those schools anyway." This is an outrage to Ladybird. And the 7th beat of the scene is an argument over her name. She wants to be the extraordinary but impractical Ladybird, and her mother wants her to be the ordinary but grateful Christine. This deepens the argument, getting to the fundamental conflict over who Christine/Ladybird is and who she should be. The mother hates the person that Ladybird wants to be, and she wants Christine to be someone different. The 8th beat of the scene is a kind of false victory, as Marion seems to have gotten the upper hand and is dressing Ladybird down with sarcasm about her work ethic and going to jail. However, The climax and ultimate surprise of the scene happens when Ladybird leaps from the car. Because scenes so often are structured around characters with conflicting objectives, we often talk about who wins the scene. And in this particular one, Ladybird wins the scene. Now, having looked through the script and having mapped out the structure, let's watch the scene itself again.
Her hand moved behind his head and supported it. Her fingers moved gently in his hair. She looked up and across the barn, and her lips came together and smiled mysteriously.
You've been listening to The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. If you...
Our college trip took 21 hours and 5 minutes.
Hey, why don't we, let's just sit with what we heard.
Are you serious?
Well, we don't have to constantly be entertaining ourselves, do we?
I wish I could live through something.
Aren't you?
Nope. The only exciting thing about 2002 is that it's a palindrome.
Okay, fine. Well, yours is the worst life of all, so you win.
Oh, so now you're mad?
No, it's
because
just you're
I
being
wanted
ridiculous
to listen to
because you
music?
have a great life.
I'm sorry, I'm not perfect.
No one's asking you to be perfect. Just consider it would do.
I don't even want to go to school in this state anyway. I hate California. I want to go to the East Coast.
Your dad and I will barely be able to afford in-state tuition.
There are loans,
Your brother,
scholarships.
your very smart brother, he can't even find a job.
He and Shelley work. They have
They
jobs.
bag at the grocery store. That is not a career, and they went to Berkeley. Your father's company is laying off people right and left. Did you even know that? No, of course you don't, because you don't think about anybody but yourself. An immaculate heart is already a luxury.
Immaculate fart. You wanted that, not me.
Miguel saw someone knifed in front of him at Sac High. Is that what you want? So you're telling me that you want to see somebody knifed right in front of you?
He barely saw that. I want to go where culture is, like
how
New
in the
York,
world did I raise such a
or at least
snob?
Connecticut or New Hampshire,
Well,
where
you
writers
couldn't
live in the
get
woods.
into those schools anyway.
Mom,
You can't even pass your driver's test.
because you wouldn't let me practice
The way
enough.
that you work, or the way that you don't work, you're not even worth state tuition, Christine.
My name is Ladybird.
Well, actually, it's not, and it's ridiculous.
Call me
because your name
Ladybird
is
like
Christine.
you said you would.
You should just go to City College. You know, with your work ethic, just go to City College and then to jail, and then back to City College, and then maybe you'd learn to pull yourself up and not expect everybody to do everything.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Let the Lord be with you.
By the way, the button of a scene is usually the very, very, very last bit of a scene that sort of encapsulates the point of the scene overall. And so, in this case, it happens not quite at the very end of the scene, but at the very beginning of the subsequent scene, when we cut to the cast and it says, "Fuck you, Ma." All right, cut to day and the end of the lecture. I'm hoping that you got a lot out of the lecture, even in this condensed video format. But if you have any questions or if things were unclear, feel free to use the Ask Your Professor discussion board or to email me with any questions you might have. All right? See you when I get back.